Hello everyone, this is Vikram and welcome to my channel. In this video, we will talk about variables and constants in Golang. Before understanding, how do you create a variable and constant in Golang, let's understand a bit about what is a variable. Okay, so basically variable is a name or an identifier given to a memory location that stores some data. Let's say I have a data known as 10, and this data has to be stored in some location within your machine. So which means it will be stored in a location that has some address. Now I can read this particular data 10 using the address, but remembering these addresses and understanding the addresses, is little bit tough. That's the reason why we give a friendly name or a symbolic name to this data call as a variable. So this a equal to 10. So a here holds the data 10, but here a is just a pointer, or you can say it is just a name given to the address that holds this data 10, right? And variable serves as a placeholder for the data, as we already said, and enable the program to access and modify the data. So instead of you accessing this data 10 through the address of the variable, I can just use the name of the variable to read the data, modify the data, etc. And the reason why this A is called as a variable is because this data can be modified. So you can you can just change the data from 10 to 11, or you can just make it to 0, which means it doesn't hold any constant data. Your program can freely modify the data of that particular variable. That's the reason why it is called as a variable. So whenever you use a variable in any programming language, you are essentially, reserving a space in the computer's memory to store that particular variable. Now, variable can be anything, right? It can store an integer, it can store a string, it can store a float, right? So depending upon how large the data is, the sufficient amount of space is reserved in the computer's memory to store that particular variable. Okay, it's not like every variable will require the same amount of space. So depending upon the type of data that a variable is holding, it decides the computer memory that variable requires. Okay. And again, as we already said, a variable can be anything, right? It can be an integer, it can be a floating point value. Okay. Again, we are going to talk about this separately. So variable can hold a simple integer data or a floating point value, or it can also hold some string, right? It can be anything. And depending upon the data that a variable is holding, uh, you know, decides the amount of memory it requires to store that particular value inside the memory. For example, a variable of type integer might require certain amount of space in the computer memory. A variable of type float might require more space to be reserved to store it, because a float also has a a decimal part, right? So which means it requires more space in the computer memory to store its particular value. Now we are not going to go more into the addresses and all. So we will see whenever the time comes. But for now, we'll just concentrate on how to create a variable, how to access it and modify it. Okay, so Python also has variables. So I can simply say a is equal to 25. So here I don't have to say, what is the data type of this variable. So whether it is holding an integer, float. Okay. So we will see why, I don't have to do this. Again, name is equal to zone. So this is again another data. Height equal to 1.75. Again, this is another data. Okay. And here what I can do is I can create another variable called birth year. And then I can subtract 2024 minus the age of the person, right? So like 2024 minus 25, I can do that. And I can also use some print statements to print that particular data. So coming to variables in Go. So variables in Go. So basically Go is statically typed language, which means you should define and declare the type of the variable that you are going to use. In comparison, you don't have to do that in Python, because Python is dynamically typed, which means so the variable type is resolved during the runtime of the execution, runtime of the program. Okay, so which means I can just set age is equal to 25 before the runtime, but I can change it um, basically to 25.5, which is again a floating point value anytime. But Go is not like that. So if you create a variable saying that it is going to hold integer data, that variable should only use integer data. I mean, it should only store the integer data or refer to an integer data. If you try to change it to some other data type like float, like you try to assign it a floating point value, it is not going to take and it is going to error out. Okay, that's the reason why Go is statically typed language, and you need to define the type of the variable at the compile time only. It will not be resolved during the runtime. Okay, now basic declaration of variable goes like this. So var is int. Okay, so it is something like, if I just take the case of a C language, so we simply say int x equal to something like 5, and then you put a semicolon to mark the end of the statement. So int x equal to 5, x is the name of the variable, and integer is the, basically the data type of the variable. Okay, so but here the declaration is quite different. So first you need to use the var keyword followed by the name of the variable and the type of the variable. Okay, so I can say var a is int. So here I'm just declaring an integer variable or integer variable with name age, but I'm not assigning any value, which means I'm not initializing it with any value. Okay, so in the next line, what I did is var age int equal to 30, so which means I'm declaring with some initial data, which is set to 30. Okay, also, you have concept of type inference in Golang, which means if you don't mention the type of the data that a variable should hold, it will be automatically taken by Go itself, like var age is equal to 30. So here I'm not saying whether the age is integer or float. It will be taken depending upon the value. Okay, so 30 means it is an integer value. So it is something like var age int equal to 30. And also I can define multiple values at once, or I mean I can declare multiple values at once. So using var x comma y comma z, all these are variables, and then I can just say 1 2 3. So here x becomes 1, becomes 2, and z becomes 3. So instead of separately defining them like var x equal to 1, var y equal to 2, so I can also do that. Okay, and we have shorthand declaration. Again, this is pretty important. Let's say I don't want to use integer and I don't want to use the this keyword var. So can I directly use age is equal to 30? No, it is not possible, because you did not declare what sort of type, data type this is variable should hold. That is one thing. And then you did not set whether it is a variable or not. Okay, let's say you have used var is int, and in the next line if you do age is equal to 30, this is perfectly fine. But if you simply use age equal to 30, it is not going to work. Then in this case I should use short variable declaration, which means, so instead of saying x equal to 10, just put colon. So colon x equal to 10. This is just like you're saying var x int equal to 10. So this is shorthand declaration. Similarly, let's say you're defining multiple variables here. So instead of using this var keyword and also setting the type of the data, okay, I can simply say xyz colon equal to 1 2 3. So this will be treated as variables where x is set to 1, y to 2, z to 3. Okay, I can also use multiple variable declarations. Let's say, I do like this, right? So var x int to 1, and then var y int to 2. So instead of using multiple var statements in multiple lines, I can simply say var and then open close. And inside it, I can say the name of the variable and the type, name of the variable and type. So it is something like, var. Okay, so x, what I can say, x equal to 1, y equal to 2, and z equal to 3. So it is up to you whether you will write the data type here or not, because it will be type interference, I mean inferenced. Okay, so this is one more way you declare and use variables. Now let's say I have a variable that is defined at the global and local level. But what is this global and local level variables? Okay, so let me just just say an example, explain with an example. Let's say you have a home. Okay, and this home has 3 different rooms, 1 2 and 3. Okay, so let's say you have particular television, so which is placed in the main entrance, or you can say hallway. So now this TV is accessible to all the rooms, right? So anyone who is staying in these rooms, they can come to the hall and see it, right? I mean, so they have easy access. Okay, so this hall which is present in the, I mean, this TV which is present in the hall, you can call it as global TV because everyone has access to it. Okay, but you can also have individual TVs or your own individual consoles, right? So in this case, these are local to those rooms, which means you can only see those or watch those televisions within the same room. So other persons cannot access it. Those are like personal, televisions, right? Like personal TVs. So we call them as local because those televisions are local to that room. So they don't have any global scope. Similarly, you can have variables that has a global scope and variables that has local scope. Okay, so what is the meaning of this global and what is the meaning of this local? So any variable that you define at the package level, okay, or at the global level, so it is a global variable, which means, let's say, we know that we'll have a lot of functions in our Go code. So here I have function known as main and I have another function known as test. Okay, so if I declare something outside these functions, okay, at the package level, you can see here I defined I declared this variable at the package level. So which means this variable called age is accessible to all the functions, which means it is accessible throughout this particular Go program. Okay. Again, if you look at the functions, individual functions, so here this individual function called main again declared the variable called age. Okay. So how this is possible? So here I already have that age variable which is already declared. So how can I redeclare it again? And I can't do that, right? I can't do that in any programming language. But here this variable age is restricted to this function. Okay, so it is not global, which means this particular age variable you can recreate within this main function, and the scope of this variable is only limited to this function, which means if your program comes out of that function, this variable age has no meaning to it. Okay, but outside this function, okay, if I try to read age variable, this data is going to be given to your print function, whatever it is, but this variable age will not be, I mean, so what I'm trying to say here is, so let's say I have a print function here somewhere that will print the age. Okay, so this age is I mean, this print statement will access this age variable, not this, because this age variable scope is destroyed. I mean, the scope is lost as soon as the control comes out from this last line. Okay, so that's why this is a local variable. Okay, so for example, I have a is equal to 40. So here this is not declaration. So you're again setting this age variable to 40. Okay, so which variable you're setting it as 40? You're not setting this one because this is local to this function. This function test cannot see it. So you're setting age to 40, this variable. So you're trying to access this variable here. Okay, so this is a local variable and global variable. So global variables you'll use if all the functions have to use a single value. Okay, so you can use a local variable in case if you want to create a variable and then use it inside that function, and you don't care about accessing that particular variable outside the function. Okay, so those are globals and variables, sorry, locals. You also have constants in Go. So what is a constant? So we know variable is changing value. Okay, so it is it is just identifier that can change its value. Anyone can change it. They can increase it, make it to 0. They can do anything. Okay, but constants in Go are not like that. So those are expressions with a fixed value. Okay, so if I say x equal to 10, so x by default it is a variable. But if I say const x equal to 10, so it is a constant, which means anyone who tries to modify that variable, your program will throw an error and it will error out. For example, I'm saying greeting. So if, instead of this constant, if I say var greeting string to hello, okay, at the declaration level, so later during the runtime of my program, I can just say greeting equal to bye. It is completely acceptable because this greeting is a variable, which means it can change its data. But if I change it to constant, so which means this greeting string, I mean greeting of greeting variable, I mean greeting constant of type string, it is fixed to hello, which means I will not be able to change this greeting to something else like bye. Okay. So for example, I want to set a common interest percentage throughout my program. Okay. So instead of setting it as a variable and allowing others to change the interest rate, I'll simply declare it as constant. Let's say constant, CONST, all small. Interest, I'll set it as a 6.5 percentage, which means everyone, if they try to read this interest, so they'll get the 6.5 value. But if anyone tries to reassign it to something like 7 or something like that, your program is going to throw an error because it is a constant. No one should be able to change it during the runtime. Okay. Similarly, you can also define multiple constants using this particular multiple. It's not a variable. Sorry, it's multiple constant declaration. So const, I can say name John, age 50, country Canada, rank of type integer. If you don't put integer, any again, it will be automatically inferenced. Okay. So rank is equal to 2400. It will be anyways considered to be of integer data type, but these are all constants. So once these are defined, you cannot change them during the runtime of the program. Now comes the interesting part, iota. Okay, so I don't know how to pronounce it perfectly. I'll just say IOTA. So what is the IOTA? Usually, why we use this is it is used to assign some constant, a numeric constant to a constant identifier. So which means, let's say if I simply say const Sunday, okay, so we know that constant Sunday, it is a constant. Okay, so I can simply give it a value called 0, okay, or 1. I can do anything. Okay, so which means it is a type integer. Okay, using iota, I can basically assign an integer constant here. Okay, so what is the meaning of an integer constant is, if I set Sunday to iota, so iota always start from 0. Okay, and then it will auto increment, which means if Sunday is set to 0, so Monday will be 1, Tuesday will be 2. Okay, it will be automatically incremented by 1. So okay, this is really helpful when you're defining a group of constants that have a common sequence. Like Sunday, we know that it always start from 0. Okay, it's a 0th day of the week. Monday, it's the first day of the week. Okay, so if you want to assign this, of course you can simply say Sunday equal to 0, Monday equal to 1, something like that. Or else you can simply just give it the uh, just simply say equal to IOTA, so it will automatically increment by 1. Okay, so this is about variables and constants. Now let's see some practical. So I've already created a folder inside my SRC in my Go path, right? So I'll try to create a file. I'll simply say main.py, and then this main file should belong to a package. So let me just say it belongs to package main, and then I'll create my main function first. Okay, so this is my main function, and inside that, let me say fmt dot println, uh, let's just start with something known as, okay, print hi. Okay, sorry, it's not main.py, it is main.go. My mistake, it is main.go. Okay, now once you save it, see here, actually you should have this fmt function. So once you save, automatically that will be imported. So this is your Go VS Code plugin is actually doing all this thing. Okay, so if you're using any normal text editor, you will not see these auto completions and all. Okay, so first what we'll do is we'll try to create a variable. So I'm saying var name. Okay, so if you don't know what is the type of that variable, you can just give the name, the value that you wanted to give to that variable, right? So I'm just setting it to my name, and then I'll simply just try to print it. So I'm just saying a name. Okay, so this is how you print a variable. Just give the name of the variable. Now in the next sessions, I'll see in how many ways you can just format these outputs using format specifiers and all. So that's for the another day. Okay, and let's run it. So go run main dot. So I need to go to the particular folder and then go run main.go. Okay. So it will simply say Vikram. So it is not, just throwing an error saying that you did not define any, type of the variable, because it will be automatically taken. Okay. Otherwise, I need to just use string here. Okay. In case if you are just using integer here. Okay. So this is where you're going to, get an error. It says it's an integer value, but the type, the value that you have given is of type string. I'll simply say var name int equal to 20 here. Now, if I try to run it, so I'm just going to get the 20 as the output. Okay. And not only this, I can also say, x comma y equal to 2 comma 3, but this won't work. The reason why we won't work is, okay, so first of all, we did not say what is x and what is y. Okay, we did not say that x and y are both integers. So how do I define them? Is I can say var x comma y, and I can set them to integer. Okay, so I can set them to integer like this, and then I can basically set them to have um, a variable but one value. Okay, so we have only defined one value here. Okay, and then so it says y declared and not used. Okay, so we have declared them, but we haven't used them. So I'll say x, and then I'll also try to print y. Okay, so initially I've just set them as 0 comma 0. Okay, and then later I changed them to x comma y equal to 2 comma 3. So of course you can also just declare a single value like this, var z equal to 4, and I can also change it to var z equal to 5 later on. Okay, and then I can try to print it. That's the reason why these are called variables, because you can easily change them. Okay, instead of writing these vars multiple times, so what I can simply do is, I can use a single var here, and then inside it I'll say x equal to 2, y equal to 3. Okay, y equal to 4 and z equal to something like 9. Okay, and I'm missing the name here. So name, I'll set it to something like so here I'm not just defining, I'm not giving the type of the variable here, because that is completely fine. Okay, I need to make sure that I give var keyword if you're following this equal to type of syntax. And then if you save and run it, your program runs, as expected. Okay, so if you don't want to use this, you can use shorthand notation. So where I can simply say x colon equal to 5. So here I don't have to use var x equal to 1. It is valid. Okay, again, using this syntax, you can also supply, multiple, variables. Like I can say 1, 2, 3, and then simply I'll say Vikram. Okay, so here x is set to 1, y to 2, and z to 3. Name is set to Vikram. And whenever you press Control S to save this file, so automatically, Go is going to format your code. Okay, or else what I can do is, let's say if I'm not following these spaces and all, of course your program works. Okay, um, okay, but if you want to make it look more beautiful and more readable, I can simply say go fmt, and then I can just pass on the name of the file. So automatically, okay, I think I have to save, and then I have to run go fmt. But the problem is, once you uh, save this file, automatically Go is going to just format it anyways. Okay, so this is shorthand notation. Even you can follow this. Now coming to global and local variables, so what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to take uh, one variable called percentage here, and I'll try to define it at the global level outside all the functions at the package level. So I'll say var percentage, you also have float 32 and float 64. So for now, I'm just taking it as an integer. I'm just setting it as a percentage, and I'm trying to read this percentage within the main function. Okay. Okay, so it says fail to save the content of the file is, please come by your version. Okay, I just saved it. So I'll create one more function here. I'll say the function name is something like test, I'll also try to print the same. Okay, but so someone has to call this function, right? Otherwise this function cannot be invoked. So what I'll do is within the main function, I'll try to call that function test, and then I'll use the brackets. Okay, so let's try to run it. So first your main function will be automatically called. Okay, and then it is trying to print the percentage, which is 5. Again, inside the main function, I'm calling the test function. It is also printing 5. Okay, since this is global, it is accessible by everyone. Okay, so I can also locally override it by creating the same percentage variable, okay, of type integer. Okay, so here percentage is a variable, so it is scoped locally, so it will be within the main function. So it is up to you, so whether to use percentage as an integer, float, or a string. Okay, so it doesn't have to be always integer just because it is coming from the global. Okay, so var percentage int, I'm setting it to 9 here. Now here I'm trying to print the percentage, but the percentage will be first checked whether there is any variable locally. So if this is not available locally, then this function will try to see if that particular variable is available globally. Okay, since this particular main function has this variable called percentage locally available, so this fmt.println is going to print a 9, and not the actual file, because this is locally available. But this test function doesn't have any percentage variable that is globally set, so that's the reason why it is trying to access the global one. In fact, if I simply say percentage, if I put it to 7, so here which percentage I'm trying to change is the globally available percentage, because this test function locally doesn't have any variable called percentage. That's the reason why it will try to change the globally available, the variable called percentage. Now you can see if I run fmt.println here, so it is going to print 7 because you're actually overriding the default global value, which is set to 5. Okay, so this is about local and global variables. Now let's try to just talk about variables. So again, variables can be sorry, constants. So constants can be again globally available, or they can be local. Okay, so here what I'm doing is I'm just changing var to const, so which means the percentage is now constant of type integer. Okay, so anyways, you can print it as usual. There is no change in how you access that variable. The thing is, once that variable is set, okay, so if I try to change it to something like 99 and all, so your Go program, before the execution itself, it is going to throw an error. Okay, because this is a constant. Okay, if you try to run, it says cannot assign to percentage. Okay, the reason is because percentage is set as constant. You cannot change a constant value once it is assigned. Okay, so this is constant. Okay, similarly I can use iota. Okay, so I can say constant. I can write multiple constants here. So I'll say Sunday, I can set it to 0. Now Sunday becomes the variable of type integer. I can say Monday set to 1. Okay, I can say Monday set to 1. But instead of this, what I can do is I can simply say Sunday set to iota. Okay, then automatically, so Monday becomes 1, Tuesday becomes 2. So these values will be automatically incremented. Now I can access any value from that constant. So if I try to print Tuesday, so it will be printed as 2. Okay, so if I try to print Wednesday, okay, so this is not yet created, so it is going to throw an error. But if I simply put Wednesday in this constant, okay, sorry for the typos, Wednesday. Okay, so if I try to put Wednesday here, and if I try to read Wednesday, it should be written as 3. Okay, not only that, let's say I don't want to start from probably 0. I can simply say iota plus 1, so which means the first value becomes 1, so the subsequent values will be again 2, 3, something like this. Now Wednesday, if I try to read, so this will become 4. So this is how you use variables and constants in Golang. So in the next video we'll see how do you use the format function, this format package to print various values using some format specifiers, right? Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.